Trump thought he had Canada backed into a corner, with tariffs rising and deadlines looming. It looked like Ottawa had no choice but to play by Washington's rules. But while the headlines focused on threats and ultimatums, Canada was quietly rewriting the rules of the game. No fiery speeches, no dramatic retaliation, just a massive energy shift that bypassed the U.S. entirely.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says a proposal for a new oil pipeline in Canada is highly likely.
Look, the bottom line is a new east-west coast pipeline in Canada is good for Canadians. It's good for world markets in that we have access to more supply.
But for the first time, Canadian liquefied natural gas is heading overseas.
For the first time ever, Canadian liquefied natural gas is heading straight to Asia, and a new oil pipeline is on the fast track. This isn't just trade. It's a power move that could change everything. While most eyes were locked on the escalating trade drama between Washington and Ottawa, Canada made a move that caught everyone off guard. In a quiet but powerful shift, Canadian liquefied natural gas was shipped directly to Asia, bypassing the United States entirely for the first time in history. It wasn't a press conference. It wasn't a fiery speech. It was infrastructure, and it marked the start of something much bigger. For years, nearly 97% of Canada's oil and gas exports went to the U.S., locking the country into a one-sided relationship that limited pricing power and global reach. But this LNG shipment broke that pattern. Instead of sending its energy south to be processed, taxed, or rerouted, Canada sent it west, straight across the Pacific, straight into the global market. The message was clear. Canada doesn't need to rely on U.S. refiners anymore. Prime Minister Mark Carney confirmed the shift shortly after, announcing that a new oil pipeline, one connecting Alberta's massive reserves to the Pacific coast, is now highly likely. That pipeline, once complete, will further expand Canada's access to global buyers and slash its dependence on American markets. This isn't retaliation, it's evolution. As Trump ramps up economic pressure, Canada is building long-term independence. LNG exports are only the beginning. What comes next has the potential to reshape North America's energy balance and redefine who really holds the power in this so-called trade war. Canada's energy play didn't stop with LNG, just days after the first shipment left. For Asia, Prime Minister Mark Carney confirmed something that had only been rumored. A new east-west pipeline connecting Alberta's oil fields to the Pacific coast is moving forward. This isn't just another infrastructure project, it's a geopolitical pivot for decades. Canadian oil has flowed almost exclusively south, straight into the hands of U.S. refiners. That limited Canada's options, kept prices low, and gave Washington quiet leverage. But this pipeline would change all of that. Once complete, it would allow Canadian crude to bypass American bottlenecks and go directly to overseas markets, particularly in Asia, where demand is rising and prices are stronger. According to former U.S. Energy Secretary Dan Brouillette, this isn't just economics, it's strategy. The pipeline is Canada's way of breaking free from a system that's kept it boxed in for years. It shifts power from American refineries to Canadian producers and global buyers, and it couldn't come at a more crucial time, with U.S. tariffs on the rise and trade negotiations in chaos. Canada is fast-tracking projects that give it more independence and bargaining power. This pipeline is about more than oil. It's about leverage, the kind that doesn't come from speeches or retaliatory taxes, but from infrastructure that lasts for generations. And just as this plan is being set in motion, the U.S. is starting to feel the consequences. But that's just the beginning. When President Trump launched a wave of tariffs against Canada, the goal was simple: apply pressure, force concessions, and bring Ottawa to the table on Washington's terms. But instead of folding, Canada took a different path, one that turned Trump's strategy on its head. While the U.S. played loud, Canada played smart. No threats, no media battles, just quiet moves that changed the rules entirely. Rather than retaliate with their own tariffs or countermeasures, Canada started investing hard in trade diversification. Energy became the centerpiece of that plan. By expanding LNG exports and fast-tracking new pipeline routes, Canada wasn't just responding to U.S. pressure. It was reducing its need for the U.S. entirely. This wasn't posturing. It was leverage in its purest form. And the timing couldn't have been more critical. As Trump raised tariffs on steel, aluminum, autos, and now copper, Canada avoided the political theater. Prime Minister Carney didn't make dramatic speeches or issue ultimatums. Instead, he posted a brief message just before midnight, a subtle but pointed update saying Canada would stand by its workers and businesses while moving forward with trade talks at its own pace. It was a move that signaled stability in the face of chaos, and it caught the White House off guard. While Trump tried to corner Canada with economic threats, Ottawa was quietly building the kind of infrastructure that can't be undone by a tweet. The trade war wasn't won through confrontation, but through preparation. At the heart of Canada's energy pivot is a project that's already changing the game, LNG Canada. Tucked away in British Columbia, this $40 billion development isn't just the largest private investment in Canadian history, it's a turning point. For the first time, Canadian natural gas is heading directly to North Asia, without ever touching U.S. soil. That single shipment marks a massive shift. Until now, Canada's energy economy was deeply tied to American demand and infrastructure. But LNG Canada breaks that dependency. With the capacity to ship 14 million tons of liquefied natural gas annually, and the potential to double that, it gives Ottawa a direct line to global markets that are hungry for clean energy alternatives. Countries like Japan, South Korea, and China are actively trying to move away from coal. Natural gas is the bridge fuel, and they need reliable suppliers. Canada, with its vast reserves and Pacific access, now stands as a key contender. The location isn't just symbolic. A tanker leaving British Columbia reaches Asian markets in nearly half the time, compared to shipments from the U.S. Gulf Coast. That's not just a convenience, it's a competitive edge. While Washington promotes its own LNG projects in Alaska, they're still years behind. Canada isn't waiting. By the time American gas arrives, Canadian cargo may already be there, undercutting U.S. pricing and positioning Canada as a serious global player in energy. This isn't a future plan. It's already happening. Canada's move into the global energy market couldn't come at a better time. Asia now accounts for more than 70% of global demand for liquefied natural gas, and that number is only climbing. Countries across the region are racing to reduce coal use, cut emissions, and secure long-term energy supplies. For years, the U.S. had the upper hand, but Canada's sudden entry is shaking up the playing field. Thanks to its Pacific coastline, Canada has something the U.S. doesn't: proximity. Tankers from British Columbia can reach ports in Japan, South Korea, and China in just over a week. That's almost half the time compared to routes from the Gulf of Mexico. Less travel time means lower shipping costs and faster delivery. In a competitive energy market, speed and reliability are everything. And unlike the U.S., which still struggles to build out enough pipeline capacity to move oil and gas efficiently, Canada is now investing aggressively. Between LNG terminals and the new Alberta pipeline to the coast, the country is no longer just an energy supplier to the U.S., it's a rising exporter to the world. This shift gives Canada leverage it's never had before. For decades, American buyers set the price and controlled the flow. Now, Canada has options, and buyers have alternatives. In a world where energy equals influence, this new infrastructure isn't just about profit, it's about power. And Canada is finally in a position to use it. Just as Canada was solidifying its energy independence, the trade battlefield shifted again. With little warning, President Trump slapped a 50% tariff on copper imports, adding to an already aggressive list that included steel, aluminum, and autos. But this wasn't just about trade. It was about timing. The copper announcement came less than 2 weeks before Canada's internal deadline to finalize a new trade deal with the U.S. Instead of reacting with outrage, Prime Minister Mark Carney took a quieter route. Late at night, just before midnight, he posted a calm but firm message. Canada would stand by its workers, keep the doors open for negotiation, and push the deadline to August 1st. No press conferences, no headline-grabbing threats, just a strategic delay, enough to buy time. lower the temperature, and keep options on the table. It was a subtle move, but it carried weight. Copper isn't just any metal. It's a cornerstone of modern infrastructure, used in everything from electric vehicles to data centers. By targeting it, Trump wasn't just applying pressure. He was escalating the stakes for Canada. The hit was real, though not the largest supplier. Its copper is deeply tied into global supply chains. Much of it is processed in Asia before flowing into U.S. markets. The tariff doesn't just disrupt trade. It shakes investor confidence and slows industry momentum. Still, Carney didn't blink. While Trump played loud and fast, Canada stayed calculated, and that difference in approach could prove decisive. What began as a targeted trade dispute has spiraled into something much more unpredictable. In his second term, President Trump has turned tariffs from economic tools into political weapons, used not just against rivals like China, but against longtime allies like Canada. The pattern is clear: sudden announcements, vague justifications, and sweeping impacts. One day it's steel, the next it's copper, and the message, "No one is safe." Canada, like many U.S. partners, is facing more than just the cost of tariffs. It's grappling with uncertainty, the kind that paralyzes industries, rattles investors, and makes long-term planning nearly impossible. As one economist put it, uncertainty is the tariff you don't see but feel every day. For Canadian businesses, that hidden cost is adding up fast. Meanwhile, the rationale for these tariffs often shifts. In Canada's case, Trump has cited fentanyl, trafficking, retaliatory duties from the past, and even dairy barriers, with little concrete evidence to back up the claims. Analysts believe the real goal is leverage, not fairness. The instability is especially dangerous because it erodes trust in trade agreements. If rules can change overnight, how do you build a stable economic relationship? Even conservative think tanks like the Manhattan Institute have raised red flags about the long-term damage. And yet, amid the chaos, Canada hasn't taken the bait. It's playing the long game, refusing to escalate, focusing on infrastructure and banking on global partnerships that outlast any administration. In a game of uncertainty, that might be its strongest move yet. While Trump fires off tariffs and deadlines, Canada has chosen a different path: measured, steady, and quietly strategic. Prime Minister Mark Carney hasn't stood at podiums shouting back. Instead, he's focused on something far more powerful: resilience. Behind the scenes, his government has been working with provinces and industries to deepen economic integration, accelerate infrastructure projects, and expand global trade relationships beyond the U.S. One major gesture came on June 30th when Canada officially dropped its proposed digital services tax, a policy expected to raise over $1 billion Canadian annually. The move wasn't about retreat. It was a calculated offer meant to restart stalled trade negotiations with Washington. And for a moment, it worked. Negotiators returned to the table. But instead of goodwill, Trump responded with more tariffs, targeting copper and threatening to 100% duties on pharmaceuticals. Carney didn't lash out. He stayed the course, signaling to both domestic industries and international allies that Canada is focused on long-term solutions, not political theater. It's a strategy that's earned mixed reactions at home. Some critics say he's being too soft, while others argue it's the only approach that offers real stability. But make no mistake, this isn't passivity. It's positioning. By staying composed and expanding economic tools outside of U.S. influence, Canada is creating leverage that can't be dismantled by a tweet or a tariff. As Trump turns trade into a daily headline, Carney is turning infrastructure into Canada's counterpunch: quiet, steady, and built to last. In the midst of tariff threats, metal wars, and midnight deadlines, one thing is becoming clear: Canada isn't just surviving this trade war, it's rewriting the rules. While Trump uses disruption as a tactic, Canada is betting on stability as a strategy. Pipelines, LNG terminals, and diversified trade routes aren't just economic tools. They're acts of sovereignty. For decades, Canada was tied almost entirely to the U.S. market. That created vulnerability, not just in pricing, but in politics. A single tweet could send industries scrambling, but that era may be ending. With LNG shipments already reaching Asia and a cross-country pipeline in motion, Canada is proving it doesn't need to play by Washington's script anymore. Prime Minister Carney's approach might not generate viral headlines, but it speaks volumes, quietly shifting deadlines, de-escalating tension, and investing in global partnerships signal a deeper transformation. This isn't about short-term wins, it's about long-term independence. Trump thought tariffs would force Canada to fold. Instead, they pushed it to evolve, and in doing so, Canada is setting a new precedent. That strength doesn't always look like retaliation. Sometimes, it looks like preparation. As the U.S. doubles down on hardball tactics, Canada is building the one thing that outlasts political cycles: infrastructure. And when the dust settles, it may not be the loudest voice that wins, but the one that was quietly laying tracks toward the future. This isn't just a trade dispute. It's a shift in power, and Canada's already moving.